Hey, hello friends, Pastor Scott here as we continue talking about authentic worship in the community of our life groups and that idea of authentic community. So on Sunday, man, that was an amazing day as we had not only the sermon about Joshua and Jericho, but an incredible baptism Sunday. So we're continuing to celebrate with all of those who were baptized and made that public declaration of faith. What a cool thing. So if anybody in your group was baptized, I hope you'll properly celebrate that together in your group. Well, we're also talking about Joshua and Jericho. And of course, we talk about the fall of the walls of Jericho. We have to talk about this guy, a shofar. As the people of Israel had come out of Egypt, they of course, hadn't formed jazz bands or a marching band or anything like that. They were shepherds. They were nomadic people that were living out in the desert. And so the horns, the trumpets that are talked about in Joshua were like these, a shofar. And you can see this is actually a ram's horn. And so this would actually be hollowed out and turned into a trumpet. And so, it sounds kind of like this. So you get a lot of those together surrounding a city, and that's enough to kind of vibrate the walls of a city and to knock it down. But that is a shofar. So although later in the temple period there were brass trumpets that were used to signal worship, when we talk about the Jericho story, it is a ram's horn just like this. Now the Jericho story is an incredible one when we think about the victory of God that was won through worship. It's a pretty incredible story where God invites his people to attack this Canaanite city, not through typical means of battle. They don't, fix bayonets and charge forward, but rather they're told to march around the city and to sing songs of worship and then to play the shofars. And actually in that, as they lift up a sound and a cry of victory, the walls fall down and the victory is won. But when we look at this victory, it's really a very incredible story in the history of Israel. So God has sent Moses in the book of Exodus. Moses has brought the people out of Egypt across the Red Sea to Mount Sinai. And then the people are in the wilderness, where then when they get to Kadesh Barnea, they lose faith. Even though Caleb and Joshua say, hey, we can go in and take the promised land, the other 10 spies say, the people are huge, we can't do it. And so the people get nervous and they fear against the enemies, and they end up not being allowed to enter the promised land. An entire generation later, Moses dies. And all of the people die in the wilderness with the exception of Caleb and Joshua. And so Caleb and Joshua are the two who become the leaders of the people as they enter the promised land, and specifically Joshua. We find this in Joshua chapter 1. After Moses, the Lord's servant, died, the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant is dead. That's it. That's it. He's dead. He's gone. So get ready. You're going to cross the Jordan River. You're going to lead the people into the land that I am ready to hand over to them. And I am going to give you every place that you set your foot, even as I promised to Moses. So Joshua is going to take the people, and in chapters 3 and 4, they're going to cross the Jordan River. Very much like the crossing of the Red Sea. So check this out. So the Red Sea was that place where they came out of bondage and they entered into making their way to Mount Sinai, where they would make a covenant with God. Now Joshua also leads the people across. And it tells us that the Jordan River was at flood stage. It was the early spring. In fact, it was the time of Passover. So as the people crossed over the river, when they got to the other side, they celebrated Passover in the Promised Land. But the spot where they crossed the Jordan, right across from Jericho, becomes a very important place, that location in the history of Israel. Check this out. We're told that right across from Jericho is also later the spot where Elijah takes Elisha. They cross the Jordan, and on the far side of the Jordan is where Elijah is taken up in the fiery chariot. A double portion of his blessing falls on Elisha. Elisha goes back into the promised land and begins his public ministry. Not only that, but right across from Jericho in the New Testament is where John the Baptist is doing his public ministry of baptism. And Jesus comes to him and is baptized at that same spot and then enters his public ministry. So the passing of leadership from Moses to Joshua, Elijah to Elisha, is foreshadowing what will happen with John the Baptist passing it on to Jesus. So we've already got this incredible scene that's happening. So the people cross the Jordan River under the leadership of Joshua, and now they prepare to enter into the promised land. But the very first obstacle in their way is this city of Jericho. Jericho is an incredible place. In fact, it is recognized as one of the longest continuously inhabited cities on the face of the planet. People have been living there for close to 12,000 years, all the way back to dating to the Bronze period. So now we have the people are camped and they're right outside, they're at Gilgal, they're right outside of Jericho. In chapter 5 it says this: when Joshua was near Jericho, he was kind of scouting it out, he was looking at the city. He looked up and saw a man standing in front of him holding a drawn sword. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you on our side or are you with our enemies?" The man answered, "Truly, I am the commander of the Lord's army. Now I have arrived." Joshua bowed down with his face to the ground and said, "What does my master want to say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army answered Joshua and said, "Remove your sandals from your feet, because the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. This answer to Joshua's question, so are you for us or for our enemies? The answer is neither. This is the commander of the Lord's army. This is Adonai Tsevaot. Now wait a minute. Remember last week when Isaiah saw the vision of the Lord seated on the throne, it was Adonai Tsevaot. And now once again, this man that appears to Joshua to give him the battle plan is the captain of the Lord, the captain of the hosts of heaven, Adonai Tsevaot. And he tells Joshua, "Remove your sandals, the place you are is holy." What does that remind us of? Exodus chapter 3, when Moses goes to the burning bush, he is told, "Remove your sandals, the ground that you are standing on is holy." Okay, this is really incredible. Because if we go all the way to the end of the Bible, in Revelation 19, we are told that the captain of the heavenly armies, Adonai Tsevaot, leads them in a final battle against the spiritual enemies of God. So this time it's not Jericho, it's not Canaanites, it's Satan and his forces. But in this case, the one who leads the armies forward is Jesus himself. When we go back to this passage, to the burning bush, and to the captain of the Lord who appears as a physical form, as a man, to Joshua, could it be that this is Jesus, a pre-incarnate Jesus that appears to give him the marching orders of how he is to fight this battle? So in the battle, he gives the plan to Joshua: go forth, lift up a shout of praise, bring your worship to the Lord, blow on the shofar. Now wait a minute. When Jesus returns, what are we told? The sound of trumpets will be played. Wow. So the battle at Jericho is actually foreshadowing several elements of the victory that Christ will win at the end. So in this case, as the people worship, as the people bring praise, as they forget their fears, as they forget their anxiety, they were able to win a great victory and claim the ground that God had promised to them. It's really an incredible picture of the victory that we have when we worship Christ and we lift up his name. So if you are done at this point, if your group doesn't have a lot of time, go ahead and begin your study. But if you have some time, let's think about this idea of Adonai Tsevaot, because there are several places in the Old Testament where this shows up. First of all, as we mentioned, the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3. Second, right here in Joshua 5 and 6, the captain of the Lord of hosts who gives the marching orders for how to take the city of Jericho. Not only that, but the Adonai Sevaot, the presence of God, is indicated in Genesis chapter 22, when Abram is told to bring his son Isaac and to sacrifice him on a mountain near the area of Mount Moriah. What do we have in that picture? Abram takes the wood of sacrifice, places it on his son Isaac, and Isaac carries the wood on his back to the place on the mountain where the sacrifice would take place. But in this case, the angel of the Lord appears and stops Abram, and there's a ram that is caught in the thicket. Could it be that Jesus is present in that moment as well? But wait a minute, think about that. It's foreshadowing where a father asks a son to carry wood to a place of sacrifice on his back, just like Jesus carried the wood of the cross to a mountain in the region near Moriah, near Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where he would be sacrificed as the Lamb of God. We also have this picture where Jesus is the victor at the end that is coming to win the victory in Revelation. So just be thinking about that in your group as you read these passages, and the victory that is won at Jericho is foreshadowing the ultimate victory of the captain of the Lord of hosts, Jesus himself, at the end. God be with you as you read these passages in your group.